International Short Stories, Volume 2, English Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tig Hines. International Short Stories, Volume 2, English Stories, edited by William Patten. Section 2. The Two Drovers, by Sir Walter Scott. Part 2. Wherever two such loving friends, how could they disagree? Oh, thus it was, he loved him dear, and thought how to requite him, and having no friend left but he did resolve to fight him, duke upon duke. The pair of friends had traversed with their usual cordiality the grassy wilds of Liddesdale, and crossed the opposite part of Cumberland emphatically called the Waste. In these solitary regions the cattle under the charge of our drovers derived their subsistence chiefly by picking their food as they went along the drove road, or sometimes by the tempting opportunity of a start and o'erloop or invasion of the neighbouring pasture where an occasion presented itself. But now the scene changed before them. They were descending towards a fertile and enclosed country, where no such liberties could be taken with impunity, or without previous arrangement and bargain with the possessors of the ground. This was more especially the case, as a great northern fair was upon the eve of taking place, where both the Scotch and the English drover expected to dispose of a part of their cattle, which it was desirable to produce in the market rested and in good order. Fields were therefore difficult to be obtained, and only upon high terms. This necessity occasioned a temporary separation betwixt the two friends, who went to bargain, each as he could, for the separate accommodation of his herd. Unhappily it chanced that both of them, unknown to each other, thought of bargaining for the ground they wanted on the property of a country gentleman of some fortune, whose estate lay in the neighbourhood. The English drover applied to the bailiff on the property, who was known to him. It chanced that the Cumbrian squire, who had entertained some suspicions of his manager's honesty, was taking occasional measures to ascertain how far they were well founded, and had desired that any inquiries about his enclosures, with a view to occupy them for a temporary purpose, should be referred to himself. As, however, Mr. Ireby had gone the day before upon a journey of some miles' distance to the northward, the bailiff chose to consider the check upon his full powers as for the time removed, and concluded that he could best consult his master's interest, and perhaps his own, in making an agreement with Harry Wakefield. Meanwhile, ignorant of what his comrade was doing, Robin Oig, on his side, chanced to be overtaken by a good-looking, smart little man upon a pony, most knowingly hogged and cropped as was then the fashion, the rider wearing tight leather breeches and long-necked bright spurs. This cavalier asked one or two pertinent questions about markets and the price of stock. So Robin, seeing him a well-judging civil gentleman, took the freedom to ask him whether he could let him know if there was any grass-land to be let in the neighbourhood for the temporary accommodation of his drove. He could not have put the question to more willing ears. The gentleman of the buckskins was the proprietor with whose bailiff Harry Wakefield had dealt, or was in the act of dealing. "Thou art in good luck, my canny Scot," said Mr. Ireby, "to have spoken to me, for I see thy cattle have done thy day's work, and I have at my disposal the only field within 3 miles that is to be let in these parts." "The drove can be gang 2, 3, 4 miles very pretty well indeed," said the cautious Highlander. "But what would his honour be asking for the beast be the head, if she was to take the part for 2 or 3 days? "We won't differ, Sawney, if you let me have 6 stots for winterers, in the way of reason." "And which beasts would your honour be for having?" "Why, let me see. The 2 black, the dun one, yon doddy, him with the twisted horn, the brocket. How much by the head?" "Ah," said Robin, "your honour is a judge, a real judge. I couldn't have set off the best 6 beasts better myself, me that ken 'em as if they were my bairns, poor things." "Well, how much per head, Sawney?" continued Mr. Ireby. "It was high markets at Doon and Falkirk," answered Robin. And thus the conversation proceeded until they had agreed on the prejust for the bullocks, the squire throwing in the temporary accommodation of the enclosure for the cattle into the boot, and Robin making, as he thought, a very good bargain, provided the grass was but tolerable. The squire walked his pony alongside of the drove, partly to show him the way and see him put into possession of the field, and partly to learn the latest news of the northern markets. They arrived at the field, and the pasture seemed excellent. But what was their surprise when they saw the bailiff quietly inducting the cattle of Harry Wakefield into the grassy goshen which had just been assigned to those of Robin Oig McCombich by the proprietor himself. Squire Ireby set spurs to his horse, dashed up to his servant, and learning what had passed between the parties, briefly informed the English drover that his bailiff had let the ground without his authority, and that he might seek grass for his cattle wherever he would, since he was to get none there. At the same time he rebuked his servant severely for having transgressed his commands, and ordered him instantly to assist in ejecting the hungry and weary cattle of Harry Wakefield, who were just beginning to enjoy a meal of unusual plenty, and to introduce those of his comrade, whom the English drover now began to consider as a rival. The feelings which arose in Wakefield's mind would have induced him to resist Mr. Ireby's decision, but every Englishman has a tolerably accurate sense of law and justice, and John Fleecebumpkin, the bailiff, having acknowledged that he had exceeded his commission, Wakefield saw nothing else for it than to collect his hungry and disappointed charge and drive them on to seek quarters elsewhere. Robin Oig saw what had happened with regret, and hastened to offer his English friend to share with him the disputed possession. But Wakefield's pride was severely hurt, and he answered disdainfully, "Take it all, man, take it all. Never make two bites of a cherry. Thou canst talk over the gentry and blear a plain man's eye. Out upon you, man. I will not kiss any man's dirty latchets for leave to bake in his oven." Robin Oig, sorry but not surprised at his comrade's displeasure, hastened to entreat his friend to wait but an hour till he had gone to the squire's house to receive payment for the cattle he had sold, and he would come back and help him to drive the cattle into some convenient place of rest, and explain to him the whole mistake they had both of them fallen into. But the Englishman continued indignant. "Thou hast been selling, hast thou? Aye, aye. Thou is a cunning lad for kenning the hours of bargaining. Go to the devil with thyself, for I will ne'er see thy false loon's visage again. Thou should be ashamed to look me in the face." "I am ashamed to look no man in the face," said Robin Oig, something moved. "And moreover, I will look you in the face this blessed day, if you will bide at the clachan down yonder." "Mayhap you had as well keep away," said his comrade, and turning his back on his former friend, he collected his unwilling associates, assisted by the bailiff, who took some real and some affected interest in seeing Wakefield accommodated. After spending some time in negotiating with more than one of the neighbouring farmers, who could not, or would not, afford the accommodation desired, Harry Wakefield, at last, and in his necessity, accomplished his point by means of the landlord of the alehouse at which Robin Oig and he had agreed to pass the night when they first separated from each other. Mine host was content to let him turn his cattle on a piece of barren moor at a price little less than the bailiff had asked for the disputed enclosure, and the wretchedness of the pasture, as well as the price paid for it, were set down as exaggerations of the breach of faith and friendship of his Scottish crony. This turn of Wakefield's passions was encouraged by the bailiff, who had his own reasons for being offended against poor Robin, as having been the unwitting cause of his falling into disgrace with his master, as well as by the innkeeper and 2 or 3 chance guests, who stimulated the drover in his resentment against his quondam associate, some from the ancient grudge against the Scots, which, when it exists anywhere, is to be found lurking in the border counties, and some from the general love of mischief, which characterizes mankind in all ranks of life, to the honour of Adam's children be it spoken. Good John Barleycorn also, who always heightens and exaggerates the prevailing passions, be they angry or kindly, was not wanting in his offices on this occasion, and confusion to false friends and hard masters was pledged in more than one tankard. In the meanwhile, Mr. Ireby found some amusement in detaining the northern drover at his ancient hall. He caused a cold round of beef to be placed before the Scot in the butler's pantry, together with a foaming tankard of home-brewed, and took pleasure in seeing the hearty appetite with which these unwonted edibles were discussed by Robin Oig McCombich. The squire himself, lighting his pipe, compounded between his patrician dignity and his love of agricultural gossip, by walking up and down while he conversed with his guest. "I passed another drove," said the squire, "with one of your countrymen behind them. There was something less beasts than your drove. Doddies, most of them. A big man was with him. None of your kilts, though, but a decent pair of breeches. Do you know who he may be?" "What, aye? That could and would be Hughie Morrison. I didna think he would have been so well up. He has made a day on us, but his Argyll shires will have wearied shanks. How far was he behind?" "I think about 6 or 7 miles," answered the squire, "for I passed them at Christenbury Crag, and I overtook you at the Holland Bush. If his beasts be leg-weary, he will be maybe selling bargains." "No, Hughie Morrison is no the man for bargains. You mun come to some Highland body like Robin Og herself for the like of these. But I mun be wishing you good night, and 20 of them, let alone one. And I mun down to the Clachan to see if the lad Harry Wackfelt is out of his humdudgeons yet." The party at the alehouse were still in full talk, and the treachery of Robin Oig still the theme of conversation, when the supposed culprit entered the apartment. His arrival, as usually happens in such a case, put an instant stop to the discussion of which he had furnished the subject, and he was received by the company assembled with that chilling silence which, more than 1,000 exclamations, tells an intruder that he is unwelcome. Surprised and offended, but not appalled by the reception which he experienced, Robin entered with an undaunted and even a haughty air, attempted no greeting, as he saw he was received with none, and placed himself by the side of the fire, a little apart from a table at which Harry Wakefield, the bailiff, and 2 or 3 other persons were seated. The ample Cumbrian kitchen would have afforded plenty of room, even for a larger separation. Robin, thus seated, proceeded to light his pipe and call for a pint of twopenny. "We have no tuppence ale," answered Ralph Heskett, the landlord, "but as thou find'st thy own tobacco, it's like thou mayst find thy own liquor too. It's the wont of thy country, I wot." "Shame, good man," said the landlady, a blithe, bustling housewife, hastening herself to supply the guest with liquor. "Thou knowest well enow what the strange man wants, and it's thy trade to be civil, man. Thou shouldst know that if the Scot likes a small pot, he pays a sure penny." Without taking any notice of this nuptial dialogue, the Highlander took the flagon in his hand, and addressing the company generally, drank the interesting toast of good markets to the party assembled. "The better that the wind blew fewer dealers from the north," said one of the farmers, "and fewer Highland runts to eat up the English meadows." "Soul of my body, but you are wrong there, my friend," answered Robin with composure. "It's your fat Englishmen that eat up our Scots cattle, poor things." "I wish there was summat to eat up their drovers," said another. "A plain Englishman canna make bread with a kenning of them." "Or an honest servant keep his master's favour, but they will come sliding in between him and the sunshine," said the bailiff. "If these be jokes," said Robin Oig with the same composure, "there is o'er many jokes upon one man." "It's no joke, but downright earnest," said the bailiff. "Harkee, Mr. Robin Og, or whatever is your name, it's right we should tell you that we are all of one opinion, and that is, that you, Mr. Robin Og, have behaved to our friend Mr. Harry Wakefield here like a raff and a blackguard." "Nae doubt," answered Robin with great composure, "and you are a set of very pretty judges, for whose brains or behaviour I would not gie a pinch of sneezing. If Mr. Harry Wackfelt kens where he is wronged, he kens where he may be righted." "He speaks truth," said Wakefield, who had listened to what had passed, divided between the offence which he had taken at Robin's late behaviour, and the revival of his habitual feelings of regard. He now rose and went towards Robin, who got up from his seat as he approached, and held out his hand. "That's right, Harry, go it, serve him out," resounded on all sides. "Tip him the nailer, show him the mill." "Hold your peace, all of you, and be," said Wakefield, and then addressing his comrade, took him by the extended hand with something alike of respect and defiance. "Robin," he said, "thou hast used me ill enough this day, but if you mean, like a frank fellow, to shake hands and take a tussle for love on the sod, why, I'll forgive thee, man, and we shall be better friends than ever." "And would it no be better to be good friends without more of the matter?" said Robin, We will be much better friendships with our banes hale than broken." Harry Wakefield dropped the hand of his friend, or rather threw it from him. "I did not think I had been keeping company for 3 years with a coward." "Coward belongs to none of my name," said Robin, whose eyes began to kindle, but keeping the command of his temper. "It was no coward's legs or hands, Harry Wakefield, that drew you out of the fords of Frew when you was drifted o'er the Black Rock, and every eel in the river expected a share of you." "And that is true enough too," said the Englishman, struck by the appeal. "Adzooks!" exclaimed the bailiff. "Sure Harry Wakefield, the nattiest lad at Whitson, Treast, Wooler Fair, Carlisle Sands, or Stagshaw Bank, is not going to show the white feather. This comes of living so long with kilts and bonnets. Men forget the use of their daddies." "I may teach you, Master Fleecebumpkin, that I have not lost the use of mine," said Wakefield, and then went on. "This will never do, Robin. We must have a turn-up, or we shall be the talk of the countryside. I'll be damned if I hurt thee. I'll put on the gloves gin thou like. Come, stand forward like a man." "To be beaten like a dog," said Robin. "Is there any reason in that? If you think I have done you wrong, I'll go before your judge, though I neither know his law nor his language." A general cry of, "No, no, no law, no lawyer, a bellyful and be friends," was echoed by the bystanders. "But," continued Robin, "if I am to fight, I have no skill to fight like a jackanapes, with hands and nails." "How would you fight, then?" said his antagonist, "though I am thinking it would be hard to bring you to the scratch anyhow." "I would fight with broadswords, and sink point on the first blood drawn, like a gentleman's." A loud shout of laughter followed the proposal, which indeed had rather escaped from poor Robin's swelling heart than had been the dictate of his sober judgment. "Gentleman, quotha!" was echoed on all sides, with a shout of unextinguishable laughter. "Very pretty, gentleman, God wot! Canst get 2 swords for the gentleman to fight with, Ralph Heskett?" "No, but I can send to the armoury at Carlisle, and lend them 2 forks to be making shift with in the meantime." "Tush, man," said another. "The bonny Scots come into the world with a blue bonnet on their heads, a dirk and pistol at their belt." "Best send post," said Mr. Fleecebumpkin, "to the Squire of Corby Castle to come and stand second to the gentleman." In the midst of this torrent of general ridicule, the Highlander instinctively gripped beneath the folds of his plaid. "But it is better not," he said in his own language. "100 curses on the swine-eaters, who know neither decency nor civility." "Make room, the pack of you," he said, advancing to the door. But his former friend interposed his sturdy bulk, and opposed his leaving the house, and when Robin Oig attempted to make his way by force, he hit him down on the floor with as much ease as a boy bowls down a 9-pin. "A ring! A ring!" was now shouted, until the dark rafters and the hams that hung on them trembled again, and the very platters on the bink clattered against each other. "Well done, Harry! Give it him home, Harry! Take care of him now! He sees his own blood!" Such were the exclamations, while the Highlander, starting from the ground, all his coldness and caution lost in frantic rage, sprung at his antagonist with the fury, the activity, and the vindictive purpose of an incensed tiger-cat. But when could rage encounter science and temper? Robin Oig again went down in the unequal contest, and as the blow was necessarily a severe one, he lay motionless on the floor of the kitchen. The landlady ran to offer some aid, but Mr. Fleecebumpkin would not permit her to approach. "Let him alone," he said. "He'll come to within time. He has not got half his broth yet." "He has got all I mean to give him, though," said his antagonist, whose heart began to relent towards his old associate. "I would rather by half give the rest to yourself, Mr. Fleecebumpkin, for you pretend to know a thing or two, and Robin had not art enough even to peel before setting to, but fought with his plaid dangling about him. Stand up, Robin, my man, all friends now, and let me hear the man that will speak a word against you or your country for your sake." Robin Oig was still under the domination of his passion, and eager to renew the onset, but being withheld on the one side by the peacemaking Dame Heskett, and on the other aware that Wakefield no longer meant to renew the combat, his fury sunk into gloomy sullenness. "Come, come, never grudge so much at it, man. said the brave-spirited Englishman with the placability of his country. "Shake hands, and we will be better friends than ever." "Friends!" exclaimed Robin Oig with strong emphasis. "Friends? Never! Look to yourself, Harry Wackfelt." "Then the curse of Cromwell on your proud Scots stomach, as the man says in the play, and you may do your worst and be damned, for one man can say nothing more to another after a tussle than that he is sorry for it." On these terms the friends parted. Robin Oig drew out in silence a piece of money, threw it on the table, and then left the alehouse. But turning at the door, he shook his hand at Wakefield, pointing with his forefinger upwards, in a manner which might imply either a threat or a caution. He then disappeared in the moonlight. Some words passed after his departure between the bailiff, who piqued himself on being a little of a bully, and Harry Wakefield, who, with generous inconsistency, was now not indisposed to begin a new combat in defence of Robin Oig's reputation, although he could not use his daddies like an Englishman, as it did not come natural to him. But Dame Heskett prevented this second quarrel from coming to a head by her peremptory interference. "There should be no more fighting in her house," she said. "There had been too much already. And you, Mr. Wakefield, may live to learn," she added, "what it is to make a deadly enemy out of a good friend." "Poor dame! Robin Oig is an honest fellow, and will never keep malice." "Do not trust to that. You do not know the dour temper of the Scots, though you have dealt with them so often. I have a right to know them, my mother being a Scot." "And so is well seen on her daughter," said Ralph Heskett. End of section 2.